Welcome to Aging with Dignity. I'm your host, Versha. Today's episode is a little bit different. It's a family story. Three sisters. They're going to share not just their memories and reflections, but also an ongoing journey of care that they're currently on. You see, they lost their mother to dementia in January 2025. After caring for their mother, they're now walking that same path again with their father, who has been diagnosed with early onset dementia. It's a conversation about what shifts, about what stays the same, and what it really means to show up for the people who once held everything together for you. It's an ongoing story of love, responsibility, and the evolving meaning of dignity in care. Let's begin. Ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves with your name, your location, and maybe the position in the sibling hierarchy?
Sure. I'm Anita Mehta. I am the eldest of the three sisters, and I'm located in Montreal.
I am Angelina. I'm the second, and I'm also in Montreal.
And I'm Angelica. I'm the youngest of the three, and I'm based in Toronto.
Well, welcome to each of you, and thank you for joining today. You are three sisters in the midst of an ongoing caregiving journey, one that's already taken you through the loss of your mom and now continues as you care for your father. Let's start with your journey with your mother. So when you think about your mother, not her illness, but just her, what first comes to mind when you think of it?
Dancing, laughter, love. Those are the words that kind of jump to my mind.
Can I add food to that?
Oh yeah, food.
Yeah, she loved to make food and feed us, and it was usually very good.
And she was a nurse, so she was a caregiver to us, and I constantly remember her coming in and out of the house for her shift work, and she really liked a good party, so
we did.
That's wonderful. You know, you with just a few words, you've really painted a picture of your mother already. So I appreciate you were able to find the right ones. If we reflect back then, how would each of you describe your role in the family as you were growing up? And also, do you feel that shaped the way you stepped up and showed up as a caregiver in this journey? Did the hierarchy make a difference?
I think it did for me as the eldest. I think I always felt some sense of responsibility. I think when I was younger, it was more of a surveyor role, kind of like looking around, seeing that everything's okay. Always had a fix-it personality, I think. And then I chose healthcare as a profession, and I think it just kind of fit with that personality. And so to answer your question, how it impacted my role as a caregiver, it became that. Surveying, kind of making sure everything was okay, caring, nurturing. So it kind of shaped who I am.
That makes sense. Angelica, can you reflect at all on that?
I don't have a deep answer to that. When I was thinking about the question, I was really closer to my dad, and I think if you think about that role and how it shaped me later, was more that I was maybe less connected to mom's journey than I am with dad's.
Interesting. Yeah. We tend to always gravitate to one or the other parent, though we may love them both, of course, that we do tend to gravitate because of personalities. Yeah. Angelica, you have any thoughts on that?
So I was thinking about this. I think I was often a facilitator or a moderator as the younger one. When personalities clashed, I would often be the one. I think I got along with everybody, and sometimes would be pulled in or do my best to help facilitate some difficult conversations. And I think I played that same role, even from a distance. Sometimes helping people come to decisions or helping us maybe move forward if we were stuck in a bit of a circle.
That's a tough role. In our family, it was my sister, so she's middle, and she ended up picking up that baton as well, even as we were children. When the disagreements happened, she was the one, and then it became a dependency almost, right? Well, can you go talk to mom about this? Can you go talk to dad? So it's not fair, but we kind of gravitate to our skills and our personalities. So when we think about caregiving, which we'd like to explore a little bit here today, and the path that you took with your mother, things don't get shared evenly, right? We're a family of three children as well, and it didn't get shared evenly amongst us. And I've not heard yet of a family that has said it was actually very even. Even when you've got the best of intentions. So what was that like for you guys growing up, as your mother was getting into her journey? How did that caregiving show up for each of you?
I guess I'll start. I think for me, I took on a lot of the health related issues. For my mom and now for my dad, I guess being a nurse by default and then being the eldest as well. So I find that a lot of the care, whether it was appointments or follow-ups or even noticing something that didn't feel right, became my role. And in my mom's case, I think I became rather obsessive with it as she deteriorated. Every change warranted some concern, warranted some follow-up. So I felt that took a lot of my time. And I was kind of working full time as well, and so I kind of felt like that was a lot.
Yeah. In my case, I think in general we stuck with our core competencies, right? I'm much more financial, legal, tax, and that's where I brought the care, I guess, in terms of managing mom and dad, their accounts, etc. I remember arranging the meeting for all of us to go to the notary and do the power of attorney documents, and then I was the primary power of attorney. So that's where I put the energy and effort in. But similar to my sister, or all both my sisters, we have children, we have our own families, we all have our own careers, and so it was all about trying to juggle that.
Yeah, that's never easy. And we talk about it as a sandwich generation, and I'm really questioning that term because I think it overly simplifies it. Right? We're not caring, like we're not pulled between the two. We're actually doing both. Right? So you are caring for both. It's not a tug, although it may feel like that. Did you feel there was imbalance between the three of you? And part of it might be location, part of it might be skill set. Did any of you ever feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough, or I'm doing too much, or?
I can I can speak to that. I recently relocated to Toronto 2 years ago. I was initially out of the country for 16 years. And so through mom's diagnosis and most of her care, I was abroad. Um, so I think two things. One is, and I do have to, hats off to Anita and Angelina. People would often ask me, "How do you manage? You're so far," and I'd always have to say, "Well, I'm lucky." You always hear about siblings who don't want to do anything or siblings who aren't stepping up, and I could always say, "No, I've got two sisters who are very proactively caring for my parents," and so that did make it easy for me. I did feel a lot of guilt for not being there, for sure. And so I tried to manage what I could from a distance. So I knew that there was no way to do as much as they could. And so I would try to do what I could, which meant we had several, unfortunately, due to the quality of care, situations with the Lakeshore Hospital and with the Sunrise in Beaconsfield where she was, and I had to deal with the ombudsman and gather reports and create documentation, and so that's what I tried to do. And then if I was able to do during evening calls, my time with the social workers, or in some cases, unfortunately, with a lawyer. So I certainly felt guilty, but tried to do what I could and traveled here as much as and often as I could.
Guilt is a heavy one, right? And I think no matter how much we're doing, we still feel it, right? I mean, even for my mother, I can share when we really had no choice to take her to Teresa Deller, which is a palliative center. I was racked with guilt over the decision, right? And it was only when I kind of role played and I was talking with a friend and realized that, yeah, there's nothing to feel guilty about, but this is a very heavy and a very real emotion that we feel when you're doing everything or when you're doing nothing. I'm sure it's still it's still creeping in there.
When you talk about the guilt piece, and we were talking about this yesterday too, it's
Yeah.
not even just if we're doing or not doing, it's what we're doing and the choices we made. For example, we talked about moving mom and dad out of the house
Hmm.
and into sort of senior living. And that still to this day causes us anguish because was it the right thing? Would it have been better had we done I made another decision? I don't know.
So, thinking back to the early days when your mother's journey started with dementia, when did you guys realize that something is just not right? And who noticed it?
I think we talked about this last night. I think me being gone for long stretches of time, I can pinpoint exactly. For me, it was December 2019, and I hadn't been back since the summer. And we talked about mom's cooking and how every time I would come back, she would ask me, "What meals do you want me to cook?" And I'd always choose dal and lamb curry. And we were staying at Angelina's house, and she made her dal, and I sat down to eat it, and I had a reaction because it tasted very, very off. It tasted like relish. And I remember asking Angelina, and she said, "Yeah, it happens sometimes." And I said, "No, that never happens." And for me, that was an indicator that something was really off. And uh, and I remember mentioning it to mom, and she got very defensive. And then I remember going to their house and seeing scraps of paper everywhere, and little notes to herself, and just things that didn't. I mean, lots of notes, like little thoughts, just for memory. And for me, right away, I said, I think something's off, and I started to talk to my friend whose father had been diagnosed with dementia. Yeah.
So that timing is interesting because December 19, and we went into COVID shortly after that. And for me, we would have these regular phone conversations as opposed to going to the house like we used to during COVID. And the phone conversations sounded fine. They were always the same, right? Do you need anything? We'll drop some groceries or pharmacy, whatever. But so it was hard to tell.
Yeah, I think there's something that can be said when you've got a bit of distance, right? Because you're not you see the difference right away. Sorry, Anita, I think you were going to add something.
I was just going to say, for me, it was during COVID. It was the grocery orders for my mom. So I was doing the groceries for my parents, and the orders became exceedingly stranger. So she would need like 6 of something or 12 of something, and so there was a definite erratic behavior change that I had noticed over the phone. But again, I would ask my dad how she is, and it would be fine. And I think that dynamic also was difficult to track because he would say everything was fine, and he would be observing some of these behaviors, as we noticed later on, but didn't think to pathologize them or didn't think to share them with us. He just kind of incorporated it into their normal routine. And so I feel we missed a window there as well, where had he said, she's talking to the TV or she's behaving rather strangely, maybe we would have clued in earlier. So I have a lot of, I guess, guilt or feelings about that in terms of not noticing it earlier. How could I not notice, given what I do for a living? How could I not notice having been in regular contact with her? So I think that was very difficult. COVID did not help. And I think the isolation actually accelerated the process quite a bit, as did, as Angelina mentioned, the move from their main source of residence.
You
We
just
did check though. So when I came back to Geneva, I was so upset about this doll situation and all the scraps of paper that I spoke with a friend of mine whose father had been diagnosed with dementia and had a doctor in Montreal. And so I asked him for this doctor's contacts, and I reached out to him, and he said that he had retired and that he couldn't help, but and then he recommended taking mom to the Jewish hospital. And Anita and Angelina did. They took her, and she still passed the evaluation, meaning I remember the doctor, or their sort of summary after was, the doctor said, well, it's hard because she's older, so it could just be her memory. There's no obvious signs. So, I mean, it's hard to say.
And we're learning so much more now, right? There are markers that can help. There are tests that you can do ahead of time at home, because the time to get to see your doctor is so long, assuming you have a doctor in Montreal. And then, of course, to get the referrals to geriatrics and neurology, all takes time. So I was curious as to how you got that diagnosis. In a Punjabi family context, did you ever talk about it, the dementia, amongst yourselves and with your mother, your father? Was it something you were able to talk about?
I think once we could name it, or it was named for us, yes. I just wanted, you said something important, like in terms of you were curious about how we got the diagnosis. I really want to emphasize that that took advocacy, because we had to follow up. We had to say something is wrong. No, this isn't right. We are worried, because it wasn't taken seriously at the beginning. And I think that was really difficult, trying to find the right resource or trying to find someone that would listen. And the number of phone calls and follow-ups and not getting responses from one clinic, then switching the care to another. So I think that's an important piece that, between the three of us, there had to be a lot of advocacy in terms of pushing for the care, because I'm not sure we would have got optimal care from my mom if that role hadn't been taken on.
Yeah, someone has to pick up the baton every time. Go ahead, Angelina. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was noodling something as you guys were talking, and it came from Anita, you, when you said the TV thing. Do you remember the TV thing? So, just I used to get phone calls from our neighbor who, when our television wasn't working for our parents, mom would go and watch the evening news at her house because she thought she was giving the news herself. Like, she thought she had to watch the news because she was giving the news. Do you remember that, guys? And then 2 or 3 times the neighbor thought that behavior was really odd and then called me. And
The Natsumi Takahashi, she had a very...
she wanted to watch her, right?
Yeah.
So it was very odd. I'm sorry to go back on that point, but it was, you triggered that.
No, you actually did. So while you were talking, I was thinking about, how did the community show up for you? Because we are living in communities, right? You all have your families, you have your jobs. Some of you are local, some of you are not. What was the role of family, if at all, in your journey with your mother?
Well, mine was unique because I think when she was initially diagnosed, my son was going on 3, and my daughter was going on 5. So quite young. She's 4. Sorry, yeah, she's going 4, going on 5. And I would leave for long periods of time. I would fly back to Montreal from Geneva, and so my husband had to just, okay, you need to do what you need to do, and my mother-in-law as well. So that was the support that I got, and some of my friends would babysit for me and help look after the kids while I was gone. Because I think one stretch I was gone for 2 months and working. I was fortunate that I could work from abroad.
I think for me, your answer about, community, and I guess I contrast it to what I saw your mom go through and how the community showed up for your mom. I don't think we had that. I think despite my mom having a lot of connections and being an active member of the community, she was also a very proud and private person. And I think, out of respect for that, it wasn't something we openly shared. Once in a while, someone might have reached out and said, how's she doing? But I think in retrospect, I think I would have loved for people to show up more, for her friends to go see her, to take her out, to spend time with her, because she was unbelievably social. And she really craved those interactions. And I do feel like it kind of disappeared along the way. So I carry a lot of sadness and disappointment and sometimes resentment at people that I think dearly of, but who I wish had shown up more for her. And so I felt that was very isolating. And I also feel that put a lot of, I think, onus on me to be her community, or to be that social person, to go and to take her outside, or to play the Indian music, or to bring her food. So I feel like that was a bit of a challenge. In terms of family, we're it. We don't have extended family. We have a few cousins in Toronto, who would have been nice had there been more of a frequency in terms of contact. But yeah, so I wanted to respond to the community piece there.
I want to reply back, and I don't know if this will help you, Anita, but there's so much that's unknown about this disease. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of stigma still. So maybe community doesn't know how to show up. For mom and dad's case, they showed up with food, which was beautiful and loving. But I remember coming and saying to Dad, I'm going to make you pasta, because he loved pasta. And he showed me the freezer full of food. And he said, go downstairs, the big chest freezer full of food. So people do things that they think help. And there's no judgment here. We're all learning. And what I'm learning is that as a caregiver or as a friend to the community, I now will not just show up with food, but I will ask, what can I do? Or I will offer to come and give respite break to the caregiver. We have to take responsibility for that, because we never knew to ask that. We never thought to say, oh, let me ask this friend of mom, or dad could ask this friend to come so he can go and meditate or read or go for a drive, whatever it is he wanted to do. So part of it is that I think not only a South Asian community in Montreal, but just as a general community, we are learning so much in this space of what we need to do, what we can do, where we can actually make a difference. So I hope that helps. It's not prescriptive at all, but
Varsha, I wanted to just add maybe one point. There was an incident and people still come and visit my dad, right? And I know we'll get to dad in a bit, but there was an incident where an old family friend asked him to join him for dinner, and dad was still driving at the time, and he messed up the restaurant and he went to the wrong one. And there was a lot of, anger and disappointment and rude phone calls. And I found that really tough. And it was even like dad was still driving. So it was before the dementia really had set in. And then the other piece was, I remember having conversations with my sisters, with people that had wanted to come visit mom. And we weren't sure we should say yes, because we didn't want her to be exposed to, she was a beautiful woman. She loved being wearing beautiful things, and we didn't know she would want to be seen the way she was. And so that was also something we were trying to navigate.
Great point, Angelina. And I think, again, back to our learning, these are the things as we move forward in life. Maybe these are conversations that we need to have as soon as the diagnosis comes. Right. One of the challenges that we've got with, and I've talked about this on the podcast in earlier episodes, we don't really get much information when we get the diagnosis. In our case, we didn't even get a pamphlet. Right. And ours also was December 2019. Of course, lockdown happened and I went into research mode. What is Alzheimer's? What do we do with this? And so maybe this is part of the learning that we have to take on, that as soon as there is such a diagnosis in the family, have a frank conversation on how do they want to be treated, all the way through to end of life. Like my mom's situation was a very rare form of dementia. So it presented like Parkinson's as well as Alzheimer's. And the Parkinson's, the loss of the motor skills, the loss of the verbal skills. We never had a conversation on what does that mean? What would she like at that point? So I think what you're raising, Angelina, is a great point, right? Like, how do we respect the history of their life while they're still here, right? Your mother, beautiful woman, very social. Would she be okay showing up in her nightgown and meeting with a friend because the friendship is more important, right? But that's a conversation that I think we need to all start thinking about having when we get these diagnoses. You touched on your father. This is something that you're now having to go through again. I think, if I understand correctly, your father has been diagnosed with early stage dementia. Can you talk about what that's doing for you again? Do you feel that you're better prepared now, having gone through it with your mom, or is it feeling like a totally different journey with your dad?
I feel dread because seeing, for me, what such a loss of dignity for my mom, and to have to imagine my father in that state. I know we'll deal with it, but it's dread for sure. I am grateful that we have the experience behind us. So we know what things we need to address with him. Do you want to stay here? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? But yeah.
Do you feel empowered because you've been through it before? Only recently?
No, I don't, because I don't think we have a system that facilitates it. And so I am envisioning another battle.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. He's in an independent retirement home. But there's this space when your dementia isn't advanced enough, so you don't qualify for full care, but you're too advanced to be in independent care. And to me, that delta, or that portion of time, is very challenging to maneuver. And so, I mean, if I think back to my mom, we changed places three
Four.
times?
She was in four places. Yes.
4 places.
Yeah.
And it was a horrible experience. I mentioned before, there was ombudsmen and lawyers and physical violence. And so I don't feel empowered. I feel
Scared.
dread.
Are you comfortable sharing that a little bit? What was that journey like? When you talk about the violence, I know that a lot of dementia patients display violence, anger. Is that what you meant by it, or was it the environment that was causing something?
It was twofold. Yeah, no, it was twofold. So Angelica was mentioning sort of, some of the difficulties we had with placements. One, it was clear I was getting a lot of resources and help and support, and someone had recommended the BPSD clinic, which is a specialized team that works with dementia patients and helps support with some of the behavioral and psychological symptoms. And so we had tried really hard to bring that team in to Sunrise, and they gave us a lot of resistance. They kind of claimed that they were experts, that they could provide the care, and it became clear over time that they could not. And they really gave us a lot of resistance because mom was, as she got more confused and more isolated, aggressive at times. And she knew what she wanted and she knew what she didn't want. And her way of communicating what she didn't want was aggressive. And the more they would try to make her do what she didn't want, obviously, she would get more agitated. And our hope was we could bring in a team of support to help them navigate or mitigate that. And I think our frustration was that they weren't open to it. And that they also had said, we'll do it. We'll try to do all these great recommendations for an exorbitant cost. And I think for us, the basic care that she required was basic care, was attached to dignity, was attached to her autonomy and not extra from our perspective. So that was the aggression or violence piece on her. What Angelica was referring to is one of the places my mom was at, she was struck by a PAB. So she was hit. And I think for us, that was it. So I remember receiving that news and going into the social worker's office and closing the door and saying, she's out of here. She's not staying here any longer. That's unacceptable. And and this is after months of negotiation trying to get her out in the first place. But as Angelica said, the system wasn't working in our favor. But it took that, unfortunately. It took her being struck by a PAB for me to have enough evidence to say she doesn't belong here and she needs to be in a different place. And that is how we got her mobilized to where she spent the last year of her life at St. Anne's.
Yeah. I do want to say that, and we never have proof, but she did end up, when one of the reports that I was involved with a lawyer and the ombudsman, was she had a black eye as well when she was at Sunrise. And I have a photo of it. I included it in my report, and there was never any resolution. And even with the Lakeshore, it was one of my ombudsman's complaints, was she ended up with 16 stitches, or a significant amount of stitches on her arm. And when I ended up filing a complaint, it came back that yes, there had been a PAB who was no longer at the lakeshore, but there was some altercation and his glasses broke and ended up cutting her. Whereas we had been told that she fell out of her bed and had cut her arm. There's a series of, I don't want to get into it, but it was a very frustrating process.
I was going to say this has got to be super frustrating. And now you're about to go down this journey with your father. And your parents were lucky to have you guys here as advocates to fight their battles, to get the justice that you needed, to get the actions taken. Do you see anything changing? Like, what would you do differently for your father if he's in a similar situation? Or how do you prevent him from even getting into a similar situation? Is there anything that we can do with the way the systems are today?
Try to keep him where he is as long as possible.
Exactly.
To minimize movement.
And I think I know it's a continuous conversation with him about what he wants. And it's not always, it's not always an easy answer. Anita and I went the other day to show him sort of the next level of care, what that might look like in the current building that he's in. And he came out of that saying, I want to die in my apartment, right? Like, I don't want to be moved. And so, I mean, that's tough to hear, but it also opens the door to say, okay, well, we want to keep you here as long as we can, but then you have to use your hearing aids, right? And then you have to use your cane, and then you have to accept some of the care because he's a very stubborn man. And so we're trying to do what he wants and keep him where he wants to be as long as we can, but it's not simple either.
It's not simple. You're right. It's a very different journey. If your mother was listening, what would she say? Or if your father is listening, what would they say about the type of care that they're getting from their children, and what does it mean to them? Do you have any thoughts on that? Putting yourselves in their shoes.
Well, my hope is from my mom that she would be pleased with the presence that I hoped I had given her, that the advocacy piece was noted. Quality of life for me was huge, and I knew it wasn't the quality of life she would have wanted for herself. But I also know that with people living with dementia, that quality of life is determined by family and their context of care. And so I felt that that made it really important for me to be that family, because I was influencing her quality of life. So my hope is that if she could have shared how she felt, and you know what, she would light up when I came in, even though she couldn't recall who I was sometimes. I think she knew that I was someone important. And I think when she would light up, or she would sing with me, or there would be some kind of interaction, or if we were playing games or music together, that she felt cared for, that she knew she was loved, that she knew she was important. So for me, I think that, yeah, that was really important. And I would always leave each visit with her asking myself, is that the best visit I could have had? Because if this is the last time that I see her, am I walking away here feeling really good about it? And I do the same with my dad now. When you ask about lessons learned, I think Angelica's right. It's difficult to feel empowered. But I think we know what to look for now, and I think we know what's really important for what we want for our parent, but also what we hope to avoid.
Yeah. And yet their journeys are going to be very different as well, right? They just will be. One of the yeah. Well, one of the things when I reflect back, being first generation immigrants to this country, that your parents were, my parents were, first of all, that's tremendous strength of character, that they come to a different country to build a life, leaving behind their families, leaving behind everything they know. And so that strength has carried them through their lives here, building everything that they had and building the support for the children, for the three of you. So when they get to this stage of life, that's got to be incredibly hard to suddenly give up that foundation of strength that they're used to working from. The other thing that I know, at least for my parents, and I don't know if it's the same for yours, I'd love to know, my parents' participation in their parents' passing was at a distance. it was in the 60s and 70s. Couldn't just jump on a plane to go back home. Their participation was write a check, send some money back to help defray the costs. The growing family here wasn't something that they could just get up and go for months at a time back to India. And so they thought about the future, but they thought about us as children. They had a will ready, right? If something happens to them, but they never thought about themselves, right? What if something like dementia, of course, we didn't even know that word back then, but they never thought about what are the choices that are made as you age. They don't see the options that are available because they never bore witness to it with their parents. I don't know if you've got thoughts on your parents' environment coming here. Is it similar? Was it different? Because I think this is something that listeners can certainly take away and learn, that both us as the older adult children that are trying to navigate the space, but also the older adults who are going through it themselves. What can they do to help make it easier for the caregivers in the family like yourselves?
Maybe I'll speak to a little bit the administrative side, because that's something that I picked up for our parents, and so very similar in that they did live through the loss of their own parents at a distance. I think Dad was able to travel home for his own father, but not his mother, and Mom was not there for her mom. But when they
Mom was there for Nani G.
Was she there? Okay, I know it was tough as well, but the piece that is what I wanted to maybe make sure our listeners hear is around documentation, and when we went through some of the legal procedures, especially for the protection mandate. My parents don't have birth certificates here. I've never found them. They do have all of their Canadian citizenship documents, their marriage certificate because they were married in Canada, and their passports, etc. But they don't have their birth certificates, and that became a bit of a barrier when we were doing the protection mandate. To the extent that when we were looking to get mums done, it was still in court and proceedings when she passed. And so, and Dad, I don't think we've even bothered to try because he also doesn't have a birth certificate. And so it was one of those things that if you know where these documents are, make sure they're handy, make sure everyone knows where they are. Talk about the protection mandate, talk about what is required to get that, what homologation means in the court, all of these things that we discovered in crisis mode, as opposed to calm and collected, and this is what we're going to plan for.
Angelina, great points, not only on the documentation, but your final point about we are operating in a crisis mode rather than having it planned ahead of time. And for the older adults who, when they reach that point, that crisis gets passed on to the children who are already in their worst point of grieving, that this is another layer that gets put on. So I really appreciate you bringing up those points.
Sorry. I think this ties to the cultural piece about the importance of having conversations. And my running joke is, for a living, I give talks on advanced care planning and the importance of having these conversations. And yet when I tried to have it with my own father, it's almost like a comedy, right? I'd say, Daddy, I'd like to know what you would want. And I remember driving him for surgery, this is years ago, and saying, if something happens, what do we need to know? Like, what are your plans? Have you talked about, and he just said, I have 3 daughters. They're educated. They're well off. If something happens to me, they'll figure it out. And I remember kind of feeling, oh, wow, like that's a lot. He didn't want to talk about it. And it was this expectation. And I do think that was very cultural for him, that we would just sort it out. We would figure it out. We would talk among ourselves and we would guess what he wanted. And that felt very heavy. But I think the 3 of us have learned now to ask those questions because of what happened with my mom. What do we do with her ashes? What kind of funeral does she want? Who do we ask to the funeral? Open casket, closed casket? Like, we did not talk about any of this. And now I'm having conversations with my dad, and I'm recording things, where do you want to go? Okay, I want to go to India. Take my ashes to India. You plan the funeral. Okay, great. So we did not have that opportunity. And I think that is a big regret because we didn't talk about death and dying. We focused so much on her living and trying to, help her live well, given her circumstances, that we didn't talk about that. Even calling a funeral home while she was actively dying was extremely stressful. And Angelina's on the phone, and all of a sudden we have an appointment, then she dies, then we don't have an appointment. It was quite stressful when it would have been nice just to sit there in grief.
Yeah.
I remember calling in January the funeral home, and then I think it was a Tuesday. It was early in the week, and we couldn't get an appointment till the following week. And I said, "Oh, this is, but it's now." And they said, "Yeah, I know a lot of people pass away in January. That's just how it works."
Wow.
just, I just wow. Okay, it's just, shocking responses.
Anita, I just want to say what you were saying makes me think that it's not only important to ask those questions as you're doing with your father now, but to keep asking it, to push for the answers, because like you said, they're not ready to talk about it. And I think one of the takeaways is maybe we should be having the conversation earlier, not at this stage. Have it when parents are in their 50s and 60s. I mean, we all know we're going to go. We just don't know how and when. Right. So have these conversations every time there's a major change in life. There's a marriage, there's a divorce, there's children, there's grandchildren, there's a business. These are all the triggers where you start to talk about what you want to have happen with the assets, with your life, your end of life, the funeral, all of that.
I think that triggered all of us.
I was going to say it triggered me to really update, especially after returning to Canada, just making sure all my documentation is in order. So that I don't want my children to have to worry about this.
Yeah, but it also made me think about how much I can do to prepare for myself in terms of, even funeral. I mean, these days you can call and book something and put a down payment and nobody has to worry about it. And then the whole discussion around dementia. And I know, Angelica, you and I talked about where we can go in Switzerland and just check in when we're ready to go. And then nobody needs to change my diaper, let's just be done with it. And so these are conversations that I'm having now that really stemmed from the experience we had with our parents.
I think for me, it's really provided opportunity to talk to my kids about it. So the kids have been active witnesses to me caring for my parents and my husband caring for his mom. And so we have a lot of conversations about aging and about what we might want as well. And I think, there's nothing more rewarding than the kids saying, we see what you're doing, we appreciate what you're doing, and we think it's great. And to the point we said, we'll do the same for you. And I think that's been lovely because you said, our parents were removed from the caregiving experience. They were so far away. They didn't witness the changes. They didn't have that hands-on experience caring for their parents. And so our children, my kids get to see it and they've been witnessing it. And whether they love it or not, they're taking grandma to the washroom or they're helping out. And so I think that has created a respect for them in terms of the aging process and maybe a more of an understanding and maybe some worry and fear and uncertainty as well. But I think that that's been really lovely in terms of them witnessing things and sort of their perception of what aging might look like and sort of their capacity to reflect on what their role might be as their parents age.
This is the intergenerational knowledge that we didn't have access to. Our parents didn't have access to, but we are now passing on. So it's a great tribute to that. Angelina, I just want to make mention. You gave a nod to something that I will be covering in Aging with Dignity, probably in season 4. You mentioned going to Switzerland. For those that are listening and may not know, we're talking about medical assistance in dying. It is legal in Canada. It's got one of the biggest take-up rate is in Quebec. And we will be having 3 very distinct episodes on that. So thank you for the little nod to that. I'm working on really, really quite hard on that one. And we'll probably see that coming through around the fall timeframe. I'm going to hand over the mic to all 3 of you. Any final comments for any listeners that you'd like to impart? Any words of wisdom or caution from your own journeys?
Can I jump in on the medical aid in dying comment, though? Given, again, maybe my background in palliative care, I guess just to mention that there are 2 viable end-of-life options, right? And that's sort of what the philosophy is. Quebec is the #1 province when it comes to medical aid in dying. And I think medical aid in dying has just been publicized more and there's so much more awareness of it, whereas good palliative care, nobody talks about. And I think both are viable end-of-life options that offer dignity, that offer to ease suffering, that allow for patient autonomy and choice. And so you can receive good palliative care up until medical aid in dying, and it is a very individual decision. And I think I just wanted to mention that good palliative care is certainly possible and actually happens on a regular basis. We just don't talk about it as much. So I just wanted to put that in contrast with medical aid and dying, given our current healthcare system.
Great point. Great point, Anita. And you can actually have the two together. You can be in palliative and then elect for MAID. So yeah, we will dig into that in a future episode, and maybe Anita, I need to bring you on as an expert as well. So any final comments on your journey then, Angelica, on that you'd like to share?
Maybe what I'll say is, learned a huge amount, maybe things I never wanted to learn in the last few years. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. We still argue all the time. I think that's normal, but we do it out of care. It was tough, and it will be tough.
I think being afar, I think my two things were just a lot of respect for my sisters who lived it a lot more than I did. And I was only here for Mom's final year. And I find that I tried to do the best that I could, but so a lot of respect for what they went through, seeing us start the journey with Dad. And my second thing is very similar to Anita, which is that, we always, when we're young, we talk about graduation, getting married, having kids. Nobody talks about even retirement, like enjoying your retirement, and nobody talks about getting older and losing your memory and losing some of that dignity. And I remember bringing my kids when my kids were younger, even though we were abroad. My mom looked after them whenever we would visit, and I used to bring them with me at the St. Anne's where she ended up, which was, by the way, phenomenal care. Hats off to them. I really, really appreciated how they looked after her. And her eyes would just light up when my kids would come in, and they didn't know her as much as their cousins, but it was really important for me to show them my mom in whatever state she was in, because she was my mom. And so she changed their diapers. And so I think it was important for them to understand that aging isn't always beautiful, but that it's important to witness it and be part of it, because she was such an active part of our lives.
If there's anything we can control, it's to have those final days to pass with dignity. Yeah.
I think for me, the lesson, I guess, related to caregivers, again, I often find myself supporting caregivers and forgot, I think, that I don't have to be a healthcare professional when I'm in the caregiver role, and I found caregiving very humbling. I found it challenging sometimes, but I don't have any regret. The only thing I can say to other caregivers is take care of yourselves as well, because if you can't take care of yourself and you don't, you can't take care of the person you love. And I found that was difficult, trying to find the time to take care of myself, trying to understand what my boundaries were. And so I think that's an important lesson for all family caregivers, and trying to find meaning in what you're doing. Because if you can't find meaning, then resentment starts to build up, regret starts to build up, anger starts to build up. And I think it was really important for me to seek help, both with friends, social support, therapy, trying to understand myself in this context. And the other important lesson, I think, for me is legacy, is trying to understand the meaning of my parents' life and what they would want us to, I guess, reflect on, what their lives meant to us, and what part of their legacy do I carry and me, my sisters carry. So I'm going to get emotional. And our children, right? The children who were raised by these grandparents for a really long time. So, sorry. So for me, the most important lesson is, how do the three of us together carry that legacy? And Angelina's right. God, we argue all the time, but we love our parents and we love each other. And that is our parents' legacy.
Nobody could have said that better, Anita. It is the legacy that you're carrying forward, and this is a tribute to your mother, to your father. I thank each of you, Anita, Angelina, Angelica, for sharing your perspectives on this journey that is still continuing with your father. for sharing so openly the challenges that you faced. I know that so many of our listeners are going to hear this and learn. And I don't say that the burden is lessened by sharing, but certainly by sharing, we get a little bit of lightness on our own bodies. So thank you once again for coming and sharing your stories.
Thanks,
Thank you
Varsha,
for
for the
having us.
opportunity.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Angelina. Thank you, Angelica. What stays with me is not just the journey you've been on, but the layers within it. Caring for a parent through dementia is never simple, but doing so as daughters in a South Asian family here in Quebec, well, that means navigating not just the illness, but expectations, identity, language, systems that don't always reflect you, and still choosing every day to show up with care and with dignity. You've done that for your mom, and now you're doing it again for your dad with more awareness, more honesty, and perhaps a different kind of strength. Maybe that's what this really is. It's not just a story of caregiving, but evolution, of a family learning in real time what it means to honor where you come from while finding your own way forward. Thank you for trusting us with that. To my listeners, as always, I ask that if this episode sparked something in you, please share it with your family, your friends, or anyone you care about. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to this podcast if you're enjoying what you hear. Thank you for listening in and sharing your time with me. And please join me each week for new insights into aging with dignity. Until next time, reminding us all to age gracefully and live vibrantly. Everything you've heard today, just real talk. It's just our personal stories, experiences, and honest opinions. This podcast isn't providing legal, medical, financial, or therapeutic advice. And no, listening doesn't make me or my guests your lawyer, doctor, financial advisor, or therapist. The guests and I are here to share stories, spark ideas, and hopefully give you something to think about. When it comes to the big decisions, make sure you do your homework or check in with the experts who know your situation best. We're here to keep the conversation going. You're the one in the driver's seat.